The snow fell softly through the glow of streetlights, covering the city in a blanket of white that muffled all sound. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday in December, and most sensible people were already home, warm and safe from the cold. Nathan Foster was not most people. At 53, Nathan had built Foster Capital Management from nothing into one of the most successful investment firms in the country. He'd just left a dinner meeting downtown, another late night in a career built on late nights, and was walking to where his driver had parked when something made him stop. A park bench near the bus stop. In the falling snow, a small figure, curled up tight. Nathan's first thought was that someone had left a bundle of clothes, but then the bundle moved, shifting slightly, and he realized with a jolt of shock that it was a child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, lay on the cold bench, her knees pulled up to her chest. She wore a thin cream-colored dress, completely inadequate for the weather, and no coat. Her light brown hair was dusted with snow, and even from a distance, Nathan could see she was shivering. For a moment, he stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then training took over, years of being a father, even though his own daughter was now grown and living across the country. Nathan approached quickly but carefully, not wanting to frighten her. "Sweetheart," he said softly. "Are you all right?" The little girl's eyes fluttered open, large hazel eyes clouded with exhaustion and cold. She looked at him without the wariness he'd expected, as if she was too tired to be afraid. "I'm waiting," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Mama said to wait here. She's coming back." Nathan's chest tightened. He looked around the empty street, at the bus stop with no buses running this late, at the snow that had clearly been falling for hours based on the accumulation on the bench. "When did your mama leave?" he asked gently, kneeling down beside the bench so he was at her eye level. "This morning," the girl said, and Nathan felt his stomach drop. "She said she had to go get medicine for my baby brother. She said to stay here and not move so she could find me. She said she'd come right back." Nathan looked at this child, this tiny, freezing child who'd been sitting here for possibly 12 hours, waiting for a mother who hadn't returned, and felt something crack in his chest. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Johnson. Emma, I'm Nathan. I'm going to help you, okay?" He was already pulling off his coat, wrapping it around her small shoulders. The coat swallowed her completely, but at least it would provide some warmth. "We need to get you somewhere warm. Can you stand up?" Emma tried, but her legs were too stiff from cold and hours of sitting. Without hesitation, Nathan scooped her up in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her shivering violently against his chest. "My mama," Emma protested weakly. "She won't know where I am." "We'll leave a note," Nathan promised, though his mind was already racing. A mother who'd left a child at a bus stop for 12 hours in winter was either in serious trouble herself or he didn't want to finish that thought. "And we'll make sure she can find you. But right now you need to get warm." His driver, Michael, looked shocked when Nathan approached the car carrying a child. But Michael had worked for Nathan for 15 years. He asked no questions, just immediately turned the heat up and grabbed a blanket from the trunk. "St. Mary's Hospital," Nathan instructed. Fast, but safe. In the warmth of the car, wrapped in the blanket with Nathan's coat still around her, Emma began to come back to life slightly. But Nathan could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the pallor of her skin, the way her hands shook even as they warmed. "Emma, do you know your mama's phone number?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Mama doesn't have a phone anymore. She said we couldn't pay for it. What about where you live? Do you know your address?" "We don't have a house," Emma said, her voice small. "We stay in Mama's car sometimes, or at the shelter when there's room. Tonight, Mama said there wasn't room, and she had to go get medicine for baby Noah, so I should wait." Nathan felt tears prick his eyes. This child, this innocent, trusting child, had been living in a car, had been left at a bus stop in the snow, and she still believed her mother was coming back. Maybe she would. Maybe something terrible had happened that prevented her return. Or maybe, and this was the thought that made Nathan's heart ache, maybe a desperate woman had made an impossible choice, leaving her daughter somewhere visible, somewhere someone might find her and help. At the hospital, Emma was checked by a doctor Nathan knew personally. He'd called ahead, pulled strings, made sure she'd be seen immediately. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition. Nothing life-threatening, but evidence of a child living in crisis. "We'll need to call social services," the doctor said quietly, away from Emma's hearing. "Standard procedure for a child found in these circumstances." "I understand," Nathan said. "But can we give it until morning? Let her rest, warm up, eat something? She's been through enough trauma tonight." The doctor agreed, and Nathan found himself sitting in a chair beside Emma's hospital bed, watching her sleep. She looked so small in the white hospital bed, so vulnerable. Someone had found her a pair of warm pajamas, and she clutched a stuffed bear the nurses had provided. Nathan should have gone home. His driver was waiting. He had meetings in the morning. But every time he tried to stand up to leave, he'd look at Emma's sleeping face and think about what would have happened if he hadn't been walking past that bus stop tonight. If he'd driven instead of walked. If he'd been 5 minutes earlier or later. She might have frozen to death, waiting for a mother who never came. When dawn broke, Emma woke to find Nathan still sitting there. She looked around the hospital room with confusion, then seemed to remember. "Did my mama come?" she asked, hope and fear mixing in her voice. "Not yet, sweetheart," Nathan said gently. "But we're looking for her. We want to make sure she's okay too." A social worker arrived at 8, a kind woman named Patricia Chen who spoke to Emma with gentle patience. Through careful questions, a picture emerged. Emma's mother, Sarah Johnson, had been a waitress until the restaurant closed. She'd lost their apartment when she couldn't pay rent. She'd been trying to care for Emma and a 9-month-old baby, living out of her car, staying at shelters when space was available. 2 days ago, the baby had developed a fever. Sarah had taken him to an emergency clinic, but they'd needed to keep him overnight for observation. With nowhere to leave Emma and no money for childcare, Sarah had made a choice that still haunted her. She'd left Emma at a visible, public place, telling her to wait, planning to come back after she dealt with the baby's crisis. But then Sarah's car, their home, had been towed. And without money to retrieve it, without a phone to make calls, Sarah had spent 2 days in a desperate spiral, trying to get back to the daughter she'd left behind. The police found Sarah that afternoon at a women's shelter, frantic and barely coherent, trying to borrow a phone to call hospitals and police stations. She had baby Noah in her arms, recovered from his fever but weak. When they told her Emma was safe, Sarah collapsed in tears. Nathan met Sarah Johnson at the hospital later that day. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with Emma's same hazel eyes, now red from crying and exhaustion. She held Noah protectively while looking at Nathan with a mixture of gratitude and shame so profound it hurt to witness. "I didn't abandon her," Sarah said, the words tumbling out. "I know how it looks, but I didn't. I was coming back. I just needed to get Noah to the doctor, and I had no one to watch her. And I thought if I left her somewhere public, somewhere safe..." She broke down completely. "I know," Nathan said quietly. "Emma told me. She waited for you just like you asked." "I'm so sorry," Sarah sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I've tried so hard. I've tried everything, but I lost my job, and then the apartment, and I couldn't keep all the pieces together anymore. I couldn't keep them safe." Nathan watched this young mother fall apart, holding her baby, drowning in circumstances beyond her control, and he made a decision. "Sarah, I want to help. If you'll let me." Over the next weeks, Nathan did something he'd never done before. He got personally involved. He set Sarah and her children up in a furnished apartment in a safe neighborhood. Not a handout, he insisted, but a loan she could repay when she was back on her feet. He connected her with a job at one of the companies in his investment portfolio. Good pay, benefits, reasonable hours. He arranged childcare for Noah and enrolled Emma in a good school. But more than that, he checked in. He visited Emma, brought her books, helped with homework. He made sure Sarah had what she needed, not just financially, but emotionally. He connected her with other single parents, with resources, with a support system she'd the more than any fortune he could ever accumulate. Never had. His daughter, Rachel, flew in from Seattle when she heard what her father was doing. "Dad, this is incredible," she said, watching Nathan play cards with Emma in the apartment's living room. "I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Present. Actually here, not just physically, but emotionally." Rachel smiled. "Mom always said you had this in you. She said you cared so much, you just didn't always know how to show it." Nathan's wife had died 6 years ago. Cancer, swift and merciless. In the years since, he'd buried himself in work, building wealth as a way to avoid feeling the emptiness. But something about Emma, about that image of her on the bench, waiting in the snow, had cracked through the walls he'd built. "I almost walked past her," Nathan admitted quietly. "I almost didn't see her. What if I hadn't stopped?" "But you did," Rachel said simply. "You stopped. You saw her, and you changed her life." 2 years passed. Emma thrived in school, making friends, joining the drama club, losing her haunted look and becoming a bright, joyful child. Noah grew into a toddler, healthy and happy. Sarah finished a community college degree in nursing that Nathan had helped fund, and she got a job at the same hospital that had treated Emma that first night. "I'm paying you back," Sarah told Nathan one evening when he stopped by for dinner, a monthly tradition that had developed. "Every month a little bit. It'll take years, but I'm going to pay back every cent." "You don't have to," Nathan said. "Yes, I do," Sarah insisted. "Not because I owe you money. Because you gave me my dignity back. You helped without making me feel like a charity case. You treated us like we mattered. That's worth more than any amount of money." Was we're on the second anniversary of the night he'd found Emma, Nathan sat in their apartment, watching Emma and Noah play while Sarah cooked dinner. His daughter Rachel was visiting, and the small space felt full of life and warmth. "Mr. Nathan," Emma said, climbing into his lap with the easy affection of a child who'd learned to trust again. "Will you read me a story?" As Nathan read to her, some fairy tale about brave princesses and happy endings, he thought about that snowy night, about the choice to stop instead of walking past, about how one moment of attention could ripple out into changed lives. He thought about his late wife, who'd always told him that money was just paper until you used it to make a difference. He thought about how much of his life he'd spent accumulating wealth and how little time he'd spent actually connecting with people. Emma had given him that back. This child he'd found on a bench in the snow had reminded him how to be human, how to see people, how to let his heart break open instead of staying locked away in self-protection. "The end," he read, closing the book. "That was a good story," Emma said sleepily, leaning against his chest. "Happy endings are the best." Nathan hugged her gently. This child who'd once shivered on a bench waiting for rescue. "Yes," he agreed. "They really are." But he knew the truth. This wasn't just a happy ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of a chosen family, of connections that went deeper than blood, of understanding that sometimes saving someone else is really about saving yourself. That night in the snow, he'd found Emma. But in doing so, he'd found his way back to the person he wanted to be. Someone who stopped, who saw, who helped. Someone who understood that all the wealth in the world meant nothing if you didn't use it to make someone's life warmer, safer, better. And that lesson, learned from a little girl on a bench in the snow,